city of Worcester for round 3 of the 2017 Minibike Championships, the second venue of 4 in the series. The opening 2 days of the campaign saw the riders visit Doncaster, where the pro favourites were the same as in 2016. Reigning champion Frank van Homert again leads the way, ahead of Bradley Pocock, with the top 5 emerging comfortably as the pace setters. Before we join the action with the first of 3 pro motos for the third round of the campaign, here's a look at what happened in the 7 supporting classes. With 2 victories out of 3, Max Pridmore made a successful 2017 debut in the kids 50cc category, ending Harry Lee's maximum run of 6 races unbeaten in the process. Pridmore had been 2 seconds faster on single lap pace in qualifying, but the 3 races saw the pair much closer than that. Less than 2 seconds separated them in the first moto, with championship leader Lee setting the fastest lap of the race. He returned to winning ways with victory in the second moto, but by a margin of just 0.2 of a second to set up a deciding third confrontation between the lead duo. In what was his most impressive ride of the races, Pridmore took victory by a 5-second margin to seal the day's overall win. But with second place in the race and the round 3 result, Lee extended his points lead by another 9 over nearest rival Ben Johnston, who took third place in each of his 3 appearances. Max Pridmore's season debut spices up the kids 50cc class by providing strong competition to the previously unbeaten Harry Lee, who nonetheless extends his championship lead to a massive 45 points with a valuable second place. Meanwhile, behind them in the day's result, Ben Johnston takes third to maintain his second place in the series overall, only banks between him and the closing Pridmore in the leaderboard. After an impeccable race weekend in Doncaster, Senna Ace Summers had a tougher time defending his points lead in the 9 to 11 age group of the Youth 125cc category in Worcester. As always, the 9 to 11 riders line up with the 12 to 14 age group in the Minibike British Championship, where Summers was up battling with the older age group at the Fat Cat Motor Park. At Apex, he had a tougher time. In the first moto, he'd dropped to the fringes of the top 10 by the opening lap, and his first result of the weekend was only 7th in class. He later rallied back with an improved second moto, but finished the day 4th in his category. Meanwhile, at the front, round 2 winner Ewan Goddard took his only race victory of the third round by a comfortable margin, ahead of the 12 to 14 championship leader Louis Dutton, who had to work his way past the fast-starting Jack Perry before mounting an unsuccessful pursuit up front. Perry took a creditable 4th in class, his best result of the day, on his way to a 5th place finish overall. Championship leaders Louis Dutton and Senna Ace Summers bounced back with improved performances in the second moto, Dutton leading from start to finish and Summers recording a 4th position finish. The race developed into 2 fragmented battles, Ewan Goddard setting the fastest lap of the race but still falling 6 seconds short of the winner. The battle between the top 2 in the 9 to 11 was 30 seconds further back down the order. Harry Streeter took the second of 3 successive class wins, holding Summers at bay, but it was a more successful damage limitation ride for Summers, who went on to lose the championship lead on a challenging afternoon. The focus in the third moto was the battle between Louis Dutton and Ewan Goddard over victory in the 12 to 14 age group, after honours had been shared between them in the first 2 races. Initially, it looked as though Goddard would take his second consecutive round win, but Louis Dutton made a successful lap 3 pass on his way to a new fastest lap of the race before opening a 9-second lead for victory. With Leo Vols and Freddie Hills both outscoring Senna Ace Summers at round 3, the previously unbeaten youngster dropped not only off the podium, but out of the championship lead in Worcester. 3 confident victories for Harry Streeter reignited that overall fight. Highly creditable display from Leo Vols with 2 second places in class to finish the round runner-up to Streeter, with Freddie Hills beating Senna Ace Summers to the podium with a crucial 3rd place and 2-point swing in the third moto. Meanwhile, in the 12 to 14 age group, Louis Dutton and Ewan Goddard have proven comfortably faster than any of their rivals and went into the third moto of round 3 tied on championship points as well as in the day's standings. But it was Dutton who came out on top to lead in the series overall. Alex Cook, their nearest rival in the standings, despite losing 8 points to James Lee, who took third. Craig Rose remained the rider to beat in the 110cc class, but Jack Titterall got his season back on track with a return to form following a disappointing round 2 performance. Titterall put in a brilliant stint on the opening 3 laps of the first moto to cut his way to second in the race behind series leader Craig Rose. A similarly spectacular ride from Matthew Pocock, who sat only 6th in the standings arriving in Worcester, gave him 3rd, although his day was more challenging from there and he finished 9th. Positions 2 to 5 in the championship were separated by only 7 points coming into the 3rd round of the campaign, and it was predictably between those riders that the closest battles were fought for the remainder of the day. Piers Skinner dropped back from that group in the leaderboard by beating just one of his 3 rivals in 3 races, but he did gradually improve during the day. He was involved in an excellent battle with Elliot Gardner in the 2nd moto, getting the better of him initially before Gardner responded and worked his way through from 5th to 3rd. Gardner only fell 3 points short of the podium, having left himself with too much work to do following the first moto. 3rd place overall instead taken by Lloyd Pettit, thanks partly to a strong 2nd place finish in the 2nd race of the day. The 3rd moto was a more straightforward affair in which the top 4 positions settled down from the end of the opening lap. Craig Rose took a 3rd successive victory and in the process opened his championship lead to 19 points. Jack Titterall for the 2nd time at round 3, finishing directly behind him as he consolidated 2nd in the series overall. Elliot Gardner and Lloyd Pettit exchanged positions in the championship standings, but otherwise the main protagonists spread out in the series leaderboard following Craig Rose's maximum return at round 3. The top 3 on the day remained the top 3 in the championship, Pettit taking 3rd, Jack Titterall bouncing back with 2nd, and Craig Rose a dominant leader. The 140cc category, including the Masters and veteran riders, provided some of the best action of round 3, with Ashley Gorman extending his championship lead but forced to work hard for the victory. In the first moto he was left in 5th position at the end of the opening lap, but worked his way past Daniel Foreman and then later ahead of Lee Mitchell for 3rd in the race, 2nd in class. Mitchell had held the lead at the half-race distance and despite slumping to 4th, took the checkered flag first among the Masters. He went on to defeats in his remaining 2 outings though and finished runner-up in class. The other noteworthy scrap in the first moto was for the lead between Troy Hayward and Taylor Hampshire. Hampshire though was later disqualified from the race and struggled in his 2 remaining rides. Ashley Gorman again produced a series of passes and was the focus of the 2nd moto. From 8th at the end of lap 1, he climbed 3 places on lap 2 and eventually to 3rd. That was good enough for class victory, this time ahead of Troy Hayward, who had himself put in a brilliant recovery from 12th to 4th. Their fight through the order left the 2 race leaders in their own scrap over top spot in the Masters category. Dale Howard passing Lee Mitchell on lap 5 to set up a decider in the 3rd race. Howard was again the winner, picking off Lee Mitchell on the 2nd lap and going on to secure top spot in the Masters category. Troy Howard made his way past Mitchell a lap later and seemed set for overall victory in the 140cc class, only for a lap 4 fall to end his hopes and clear the way for Ashley Gorman to take another class win. Troy Hayward's mid-race misfortune in the 3rd moto dropped him to 3rd in the round 3 result, behind Luke Humphrey, for whom a consistent day paid off. Humphrey remained Gorman's closest rival in the championship standings, but dropped 12 points further back. With just 9 points dropped in 9 races, a stunning start to the season for Ashley Gorman left him the man to beat. Meanwhile, a first victory for Dale Howard closed him to within 8 points of Lee Mitchell in the Masters, and 2nd place for Christopher Rose in the Veterans extended his championship lead. Three successive victories for Robert Johnson enabled him to qualify for a place alongside the pro riders for round 4 of the campaign, with the top 3 in the expert category moving up for the subsequent round. Behind him, Ashley Good did well to make up points following a 5th position finish first time out, progressing with a 2nd and 3rd place result in his remaining outings. The trio of qualifiers was completed by Ashley Arrowsmith, who had also moved up following the opening round in Doncaster, before dropping back down with only 3 points at round 2. Building up the revs then for the first of 3 motos at round 3 of the 2017 campaign. We are underway. A poor start from Bradley Pocock. A good one though from Blaine Blackwell, and it's Blackwell who takes the whole shot. Side-by-side action for second position as Sebastian Kergar is relegated down to third. Dominic Foreman coming through. They're still side-by-side. Further back, Frank van Homert all the way down in 5th position, and Bradley Pocock recovering from 11th place, cutting his way between 2 riders there to move through into 9th position, but still a lot of work to do for Bradley Pocock, who came into this race with 7 points to make up on the championship leader Frank van Homert, and van Homert hasn't really got off to the best possible start either. Pat Crump there passing Joe Smith for 7th position. We've got a faller, Dominic Foreman, down from 3rd position. The race continuing on around him as Bradley Pocock dives for the inside on Joe Banks, I think that is, and down goes Bradley Pocock, making his way back up to his feet now, and that's once again going to relegate him outside of the top 10 as he tries to cut his way back through around the outside. So Bradley Pocock with a disastrous first lap. It's a story we've told various times already in 2017 at the opening 2 rounds, and his championship rivals in the top 3 positions are blasting clear. Blaine Blackwell currently 4th in the overall point standings, has had a great start to this one, a superb getaway once again from him. There's a bit of a gap emerging between 2nd and 3rd position. Sebastian Kergar at the moment, the Dane, right on the tail of Blaine Blackwell, but with a sizable margin behind him to Frank van Homert, who sits in 3rd place. At the end of the opening lap then, it's pretty close between 1st and 2nd positions as further back Bradley Pocock continues to work his way through the field, so more progress being shown by Bradley Pocock. It's Blaine Blackwell who leads it then. Sebastian Kergar in 2nd. Joe Smith there, stopping from 7th position. So disastrous for Joe Smith. He was up inside the top 10 positions, but he's not going to be anymore as the rest of the field blasts clear and Joe Smith looks set to retire from the race. It's Blaine Blackwell up front. Sebastian Kergar being dropped ever so slightly in 2nd position. Frank van Homert with a margin to make up after a far from inspiring opening lap. And it's Wayne Chamel at the moment up in 4th position with Pat Crump behind him in P5, and Bradley Pocock still trying to work his way through the field. He has quickly managed to move his way up into 6th position, but it's harder with each passing move to get through to those top positions. The top 3 closely packed together, sharing a straight at the moment. It's Blaine Blackwell out in front, as around the outside now comes Bradley Pocock to pick off Pat Crump, so that's the move for 5th position, and there is a bit of a gap between 4th and 5th places, but now that Bradley Pocock has a bit of clear air, he can start to go off in pursuit of the lead quartet. It's Blaine Blackwell up front, Sebastian Kergar 2nd, Frank van Homert in 3rd, Wayne Chamel the surprise package in 4th position, and then Bradley Pocock, the current championship number 2, who sits down in 5th position after a fall whilst trying to negotiate traffic after an uninspiring getaway in the first place for the challenger to honours in 2017. Blaine Blackwell then leading ahead of Sebastian Kergar. New fastest lap of the race from Frank van Homert in 3rd position, and Bradley Pocock going even faster than that as he crosses the line in 5th place with a 1:29.9. That compares favourably by about 1.2 seconds over Frank van Homert, who himself has closed on the lead duo. So it's starting to get pretty close now in those top 5 positions. And speaking of close, Frank van Homert ducking for the inside there on Sebastian Kergar, who repays the compliment. It's close between the 2 teammates in 2nd and 3rd positions, and while they squabble, that's exactly what Blaine Blackwell needs to get away, because Kergar was a couple of tenths faster than him on that previous lap, and van Homert closed at a rate of over 1.5 seconds on lap number 2. Blackwell now under severe pressure, holding off Sebastian Kergar, who looks to the outside line through the left-hander. Blackwell, though, holds the racing line, and Kergar once again is held at bay. The Dane has been looking for a way path throughout on the tail of the number 71 machine, but for the moment he's being held back. And watch Bradley Pocock starting to gain on Wayne Chamel as well. A separate race developing over 4th position. As they go side by side once again for the race lead. Blackwell holding the inside, Kergar building up his speed around the outside. He's held at bay. He was held back on a couple of occasions in the opening week of the 2017 season. Doesn't seem to have the ease with which his teammate makes the overtaking manoeuvres, but at the moment Frank van Homert himself is unable to find a way past into the top 2. He's the closest, though, that he's been all race so far to Blaine Blackwell, the current race leader, and Sebastian Kergar, who sits in 2nd place. Van Homert looking to the inside as they come through to complete the 3rd lap Blaine Blackwell with a new personal best of 132.9, fractionally faster than Sebastian Kergar, but slower than Frank van Homet behind him, and significantly slower than Bradley Pocock, who's gained once again over a second on each of the top three on that previous lap, and is now starting to become in contention for a top three place in this opening moto as round 3 of the 2017 Minibike British Championship. It's Blaine Blackwell then who has that advantage, and he managed to open it up ever so slightly on the previous lap with Kergar and Frank van Homet swapping positions in the battle for second as they flash through the infield section. You can see Wayne Chamel on the other side of the circuit trying to haul his bike through on foot. So it looks like a potential retirement from him, and obviously that's going to release his rivals up through the field as well. Well, while our focus has been taken by the leaders' squabbles, Dominic Foreman has been producing some majestic manoeuvres to get back through into the top 10. Remember, he found himself stranded in the lower reaches of the field after a lap 1 fall from a top 5 space. And the rider who currently sits 5th in the championship is now back up inside the top 10, 9th place last lap around, having just passed Craig Newton for that 9th position. And talking about passes, that was an inside lunge from Frank van Homet. He's cut across the front of his own teammate and once again looks up to the outside line to claim that second place. So Sebastian Kergar found out as he looked to the outside line, and Frank van Homet had rehearsed that manoeuvre earlier on in the race, and this time he manages to make it pay. A perfect block pass from Frank van Homet, who's now released up into second position and on the tail of Blaine Blackwell for the first time. Blaine Blackwell with a new personal best last time around, a 1:31.7. Frank van Homet was actually slower on lap number 4, but significantly faster on lap 5. And Bradley Pocock, you can see he's now right on the tail of the trio ahead of him as they negotiate the back markers under blue flags, of course, to try and release them through. And this race is getting very spicy now. Frank van Homet in second place. Third is with Sebastian Kergar. Blaine Blackwell is encountering lap traffic first, but he's managed to build up a little bit of a margin as Pocock looks to the outside line. He's the man with the momentum and the man with the inside line, and Pocock makes the move stick for third position. He's got to be careful not to get tangled up with Frank van Homet though, as he tries to work his way through and launches himself onto the tail of the reigning champion, and down the inside line comes Bradley Pocock to claim second position. 2 manoeuvres in a matter of a few turns. They're still side by side as Van Homet goes for the cutback, but it's Bradley Pocock who's got the better drag race down to the top end of the circuit, and it's Pocock who claims that second position. So Frank van Homet putting up more of a fight than Sebastian Kergar did before him, and Kergar, having already been passed by Frank van Homet, then loses out to Bradley Pocock and suddenly finds himself outside of the top 4 positions altogether. Pocock immediately looking up to the outside line to try and build up pace and momentum on the tail of Blaine Blackwell. How quickly can Pocock get to the race leader? He was significantly faster than him on that previous lap, to the tune of almost 3 seconds faster than Blaine Blackwell, 2 seconds faster than Frank van Homet. Well, he's already passed van Homet, so that's a bad omen for Blaine Blackwell, who sits at the moment in the race leading position. But already Bradley Pocock looking to the inside line, coming out of the final turn and onto the start-finish straight once again. Blackwell had it covered for the moment, but it's Bradley Pocock who is on the march. A 1:32.6 on that previous lap, over a second faster than Blaine Blackwell with a 1:33.9. So Pocock, it seems at the moment as though it's just a matter of time before he makes his move. He goes up to the outside. Blackwell will cover the inside. He moves up far enough to block exactly the route that Pocock wanted to take, forcing the number 57 rider to the outside line of Blackwell. Still holding on valiantly for the moment, but we know that Bradley Pocock has been coming at him at a pace of a second a lap, and it's Pocock here who stretches his legs once again, and down the inside he comes. It's a move he made successfully on Frank van Homet, and now he's made the same move on Blaine Blackwell to take the race lead, and Blackwell has no answer to the sheer pace and domination of Bradley Pocock, who's setting off now for what would be a third race victory of the season to match Frank van Homet, who sits down in third place and hasn't really had the pace in this race either to live with either Blaine Blackwell or Bradley Pocock, the new race leader. It's Pocock in front then, Blaine Blackwell in second place. Frank van Homet will try to come again. Sebastian Kergar being a little bit tailed off now through lap traffic, although as I say that, Frank van Homet was held up there on that last hairpin, stuck on the outside line behind a back marker, and that won't do his cause any good whatsoever as he tries to reel in Blaine Blackwell, at least instigate some damage limitation here, knowing that his main championship rival Bradley Pocock looks set to take a third race victory of the 2017 campaign. The last lap board is out, and although Bradley Pocock is pulling well clear out in front, we've still got a race on our hands here. Frank van Homet and Sebastian Kiergaard have cruised back onto the tail of Blaine Blackwell. The slowest of this trio is the rider currently sitting in second place, certainly on the basis of what we saw on the last lap around lap number 8. Blaine Blackwell setting a 1:34.4, Frank van Homet a full second faster, and Sebastian Kiergaard half a second faster than him. And actually, it's the Dane who looks most likely to make progress at the moment on the tail of Dutchman Frank van Homet, who sits in third position. Bradley Pocock is away and gone, almost 3 seconds faster than Blaine Blackwell on the previous lap, and well clear of any drama. As long as he can keep it on the island in the remainder of this race, he should be on his way towards victory. Meanwhile, further down the order, up now into 6th position, Dominic Foreman. What a brilliant recovery that is from him, getting better of Jody Burton on that previous lap to take that 6th place, and Burton relegated down to 7th as Frank van Homet encounters Joe Banks in probably just the wrong place on the circuit, trying to come through against one of the back markers here, and Sebastian Kiergaard was right on his tail but couldn't really take advantage. Things perhaps starting to settle down now from positions 2 to 4. It's Bradley Pocock who's heading towards the checkered flag, but it's Blaine Blackwell who really has been the star of this first moto at round 3 of the 2017 Minibike British Championship. Pocock had the outright speed, but Blackwell has done brilliantly to fend off the attentions of both Frank van Homet and Sebastian Kiergaard. As they come around the final turn then, it's Bradley Pocock who takes the checkered flag, his 3rd race victory of the season. He hasn't been out of the top 2 positions since the opening round of the season now, and that despite a fall on the opening lap where he had to work his way through from outside of the top 10 twice, and eventually coming through to take the checkered flag at stages during that race. 3 seconds a lap faster than anyone else. That is an incredible amount of pace from Bradley Pocock. A highly creditable 2nd place then going the way of Blaine Blackwell. 3rd position to Frank van Homet, and Sebastian Kiergaard really struggled to make overtakes there, but he certainly had the pace. Each time he dropped back from the lead trio, he was able to gain in ground once again, but eventually 4th place will be a disappointment for him after 3 successive 3rd place finishes at round number 2. Dominic Foreman with a highly creditable ride as well, working his way back into the top 6 positions and eventually getting the better of Pat Crump for P5, but it's further dropped ground in the battle for the championship overall, and it's the top 4 who are closing up while Dominic Foreman starts to slip away behind them. So Bradley Pocock, comfortably fastest in the first moto, has an opportunity to put one hand on round 3 victory and also an opportunity to take the championship lead as we prepare to get underway with the 2nd moto here at round 3 in Worcester. Away with a fast start from Blaine Blackwell once again. Bradley Pocock away pretty well as well. He's up to 4th position. A great start for Joe Smith. He holds P2 around the opening couple of turns. He's holding back the traffic behind him. Blackwell escaping away, and now riders going either side of him. Pat Crump down the inside and Bradley Pocock around the outside coming through for 3rd place. Further back down the order, Frank van Homet well and truly stranded in traffic. Sebastian Kiergaard off to a good start. He's trying to follow Bradley Pocock through the field as Pocock comes diving down the inside just to consolidate that 3rd position. And meanwhile, Sebastian Kiergaard is up to 5th ahead of Dominic Foreman now and challenging for 4th down the inside of Joe Smith. And it looks as though he's made that manoeuvre successfully. Meanwhile, Bradley Pocock already in pursuit of Pat Crump, looking to the outside line, and Pocock making that pass on Crump for 2nd place. Meanwhile, Dominic Foreman passing Joe Smith for 5th position, and Frank van Homet is already up to 7th and now looking for a way through past Smith as well, down the inside and through to 6th place. So plenty of position changes since the opening couple of turns, but once again a familiar story with the number 71 Blaine Blackwell looking comfortable out in front, and now it's just a question of whether he can hold on. Sebastian Kiergaard cutting to the inside there on Pat Crump to make the latest overtaking manoeuvre. Crump was away well, managed to be the first rider to get the better of Joe Smith, and as Smith continues to plummet through the field, Crump is holding on well to position, but it's 4th place for the moment for him. Blaine Blackwell then out in front as they come to complete the opening lap with Bradley Pocock in 2nd position. Dominic Foreman now on the tail of Pat Crump and he'll want to clear him as quickly as possible because he's got Frank Van Homet on his tail and closing in all the time. Van Homet with a poor getaway, really. Found himself stuck in traffic, found himself stuck on the part of the circuit he didn't want to be on, and has had to work his way through back since then. Blaine Blackwell then in front, and it's now Bradley Pocock looking to the outside line, who doesn't seem to have quite the same pace advantage as he did in the first moto. Dominic Foreman pulling alongside Pat Crump. That's to try and take fourth position, and it looks as though he's managed to make that move stick. So he's got a bit of a buffer now between himself and Frank Van Homet. I was just explaining that Pocock was about 3 seconds a lap faster at stages during the first moto than his rivals, including Blaine Blackwell. He doesn't seem to have quite that pace advantage here, but he is looking down the inside of Blackwell, who moves to cover. So it's Pocock who's on the attack, but Blackwell doing a better job of defending this time around than he did previously in the first moto. Frank Van Homet has now passed Pat Crump, so he is through into 5th position and released back onto the tail once again of Dominic Foreman, although Crump tries to repay the compliments as the leaders go side by side. Blaine Blackwell on the inside, Bradley Pocock reaching up to utilise the full width of the circuit and the full extent of the berm as he comes alongside and now tries to snatch the race lead. Is Blackwell still holding on valiantly for the moment? He cuts across the front of Pocock. Pocock will now have the momentum, looks up to the outside line. Can he fire himself through to complete the lap as the race leader? It's Pocock who takes it then, ahead of Blackwell in second. Third still with Sebastian Kierkegaard, and the progress and the momentum now is with Frank Van Homet as Sebastian Kierkegaard pulls up with problems. Kierkegaard with problems, and that's going to drop him down a series of positions, and well, that could even prove terminal. Kierkegaard trying to get the machine started once again. He's already lost out to a handful of riders as they continue on. Kierkegaard relegated down to 8th position. He's got a huge pack now right on his tail as he does finally get the machine started and back around the first couple of turns. Well, it looks as though he's immediately settled back into his pace because he's managed to just extend that gap slightly compared to what it was coming off the final turn as the entire train, that midfield group, gained on the tail of him. Andrew Luke there getting around the outside of Joe Smith, so that's for 9th position, and Smith relegated to the fringes of the top 10. No change up front, it's Bradley Pocock leading Blaine Blackwell, but Blackwell doing well to keep with his pace, so that really proves what I was saying. Dominic Foreman now under pressure from Frank Van Homet, and that's in the battle for 3rd position, and Pat Crump is down. Pat Crump down from 5th position, and he's going to have dropped a couple of places there. He is straight back up to his feet, back on board the machine. That's a turn that has caught out several of the riders in the support categories here today, but not so much the pros. But it was Pat Crump who was caught out by it there, and Frank Van Homet has now cleared Dominic Foreman for 3rd position, and things should get very interesting up front because Bradley Pocock hasn't really been able to open too much of a margin in the lap since he made the pass on Blaine Blackwell, and Frank Van Homet is now going to try and come after the pair. It's Pocock who leads us then. It's 2nd place with Blaine Blackwell, 3rd with Frank Van Homet, only narrowly ahead of Dominic Foreman after dispatching him on that lap. And now it's a question of whether Van Homet can go off after the race leaders or whether Bradley Pocock will hold on to become the new championship leader after the 2nd moto here at round 3 of the 2017 Minibike British Championship. Pocock with 2 points to make up on Frank Van Homet, who at the moment looks set to drop 5, and he's still under pressure from Dominic Foreman, who hasn't really been dropped since that overtaking manoeuvre was made. Further back down the order, Sebastian Kierkegaard trying to recover positions. He's straight onto the tail of Pat Crump, who of course had that misfortune and that fall, so he's the first to drop into the clutches of the Dane as he tries to recover back through the field from 7th position. He quickly gaps that train, that group behind him, the middle order pack. Well, now Kierkegaard trying to recover the top positions, and that's going to be a whole lot harder than it is to accelerate away from the tail order runners. No such difficulties out in front from Bradley Pocock. He has been faultless so far, as we see Kierkegaard now clear of Pat Crump. Wayne Schimmel and Chris Ayres are the next riders in line for him to tackle. Back with the leader, Bradley Pocock, a new fastest lap of the race last time around, a 1:31 flat, extending his lead by 0.6 of a second. It's now 2.5 seconds, the gap between Bradley Pocock and Blaine Blackwell, who sits in 2nd position, and they in turn then have a margin over Frank Van Homet, and that's great news for Pocock in the context of the championship, to have a buffer directly behind him, provided by Blaine Blackwell, who's had a successful weekend so far here in Worcester. Coming through to complete another lap are Chris Ayres and Wayne Chamel, and you can see that Sebastian Kergar is now right on their tail. This is the battle for 5th, 6th and 7th positions. So while the leaders are going at it over key positions at the top of the field, well, it's a damage limitation exercise for Sebastian Kergar after his earlier misfortune, a rider who already missed out on a top 3 place in the opening moto of the weekend, and his hopes of making the podium here at round 3 are running thin already as he sits in the lower order of the field following that earlier race misfortune. It's Pocock up front then. In second place, it's still Blaine Blackwell. Frank van Homet being held up in traffic somewhat more than the 2 leaders, but he has managed to gap Dominic Foreman, who sits in 4th position, and then there's a fairly sizable gap to the rest of the pack behind, led by Chris Ayres and Wayne Chamel, but with Sebastian Kergar making progress, and there is Kergar into 6th position, and so it's Chamel who's made the progress. He's got the better of Ayres, and Ayres has also dropped behind Sebastian Kergar, who's come through from 7th to 6th. Heading now towards the final lap, and the top 3 positions in this second motor round 3 of the 2017 Minibike British Championship, exactly as they were in the opening moto. It's Bradley Pocock who leads them into this final lap then, ahead of Blaine Blackwell, whose fast start at the moment is going to credit him with 2nd position. He's held on well and stayed on the tail of the race leader Bradley Pocock valiantly, and after a couple of laps of just losing half a second or so, eventually Pocock has managed to blast away. But Frank van Homet, the reigning champion and championship leader coming into this race, hasn't been able to do too much about Blaine Blackwell, and because of that looks set to drop well back now in the standings behind Bradley Pocock. We saw there flashing past Sebastian Kergar, now on the tail of Wayne Chamel, so trying to recover 5th position, and it's been a damage limitation ride for the Dane after problems earlier on in the race. Craig Powell down from 16th position, so that's after a recovery from right near the back of the pack. He was well down the order and made up 10 or so positions, a lap down admittedly on the lead runners, but up to 16th position, and now by the looks of it out of the race. Up front, no change. Bradley Pocock heading towards the victory. It's going to be his 4th race win of the 2017 campaign, which will put him 1 above Frank van Homet, his main championship rival. And crucially in the points as well, it will leave him with 5 successive top 2 race finishes, and on a run that stretches all the way back to the first race of the season. It's the only race in which he hasn't finished in the top 3 positions. It's going to put him in with a great chance of winning here at round 3. He was 3rd overall at round 1. He was 2nd overall at round 2. And Bradley Pocock makes it 2 wins out of 2 at round 3 so far. 2nd over the line with Blaine Blackwell. It's been a great weekend for him so far. 3rd place going the way of Frank van Homet. Dominic Foreman will eventually be over the line to collect 4th position, and then it's Wayne Chamel and Chris Ayres holding on, and more misfortune for Sebastian Kergar, who pulls up before the finish and is going to miss out on a point scoring position altogether here in the second moto. So after a creditable 18-point score in race number 1, well, missing out on a top 5 place altogether this time around, it's Sebastian Kergar. The top 2 in the 2017 Minibike British Championship come into the 3rd race of the 3rd round, separated by just 3 points after Bradley Pocock won the opening 2 races to overhaul Frank van Homet in the series standings. The top 3 in the opening 2 races have been identical. Pocock ahead of Blackwell and van Homet. Can van Homet, the reigning champion, turn things around? As we get underway with the 3rd moto, fast start for the 3rd time, a 3rd successive hole shot for Blaine Blackwell, who leads the way. Dominic Foreman pursuing him in 2nd place. They were side by side early on for 3rd position between Joe Smith and Jody Burton, as Pat Crump then leads Frank van Homet and Bradley Pocock further down the order. Not a great start for Sebastian Kergar. Looking up to the outside line, Bradley Pocock, he gets wedged up wide by Pat Crump. Meanwhile, Frank van Homet picking off Joe Smith for 4th position, and now in pursuit of P3 as he goes off in chase of the leaders. He gets out of shape though, and past him comes Bradley Pocock. It's Pocock who has the momentum. He will now look to the inside of Joe Smith as well, and has an opportunity to move through into 4th position. So from 6th to 4th in the matter of one straight, with Frank van Homet getting it all wrong and giving up a golden opportunity to put a rider between himself and Bradley Pocock, and instead it's Pocock now who has a bit of a buffer with Joe Smith directly behind him, and Frank van Homet's progress halted in the early stages of this third moto. Sebastian Kjærgaard watching on as Van Homet now does release himself from the tail of Joe Smith, and Kjærgaard quickly following. So Joe Smith with another fast start, but again is dropping backwards through the field. The same can't be said for Blaine Blackwell, who has been brilliant as the gate has dropped in each of the 2 races so far, and has done the same in race number 3, and is now looking for a top 3 finish once again. It's Blaine Blackwell leading the way, Dominic Foreman in second, a pretty sizable margin then back to Bradley Pocock in 3rd place as Frank van Homet looks through on the inside line of Jody Burton to take that 4th position away. Sebastian Kjærgaard behind Burton in 6th place, Pat Crump, Joe Smith, Clement Bajot and Craig Newton rounding out the top 10 at the end of the opening lap. On board with Sebastian Kjærgaard as he now pursues Jody Burton over that 5th position. Frank van Homet making his way through, and Clement Bajot with some problems there. Looks as though the machine has let him down. He sat inside the top 10 positions, having finished high in the 2nd moto, a 10th place finish on that occasion as well. It is not going to be a top 10 finish by the looks of it this time around for the Frenchman, who drops well back through the field with mechanical difficulties. Side by side, meanwhile, for the race-leading duo, it's Blaine Blackwell out in front, but he's coming under siege here from Dominic Foreman. Certainly the best race he's had so far this weekend. 33 points scored in the opening 2 motos, and this is the closest he's been to the top of the field so far. Bradley Pocock, though, starting to gain on him, and Frank van Homet dropping his teammate Sebastian Kjærgaard further back through the order. Kjærgaard having got the better of Jody Burton, while Blaine Blackwell and Dominic Foreman went side by side up front. Joe Banks there passing James Cook, that's for 13th position, and Wayne Chamel, who was only 20th at the end of the opening lap, is already challenging for 16th position. So Wayne Chamel, who had a 5th place finish in the 2nd moto after a DNF first time out, is starting to come through the field as Bradley Pocock does the same, looking to the inside line on Dominic Foreman. Blackwell then leading the race with a 1:33 flat on that previous lap, 0.4 of a second gained on Dominic Foreman, who sits in 2nd position. A new fastest lap of the race from Bradley Pocock, a 1:30.7, so significantly faster than the 2 riders up ahead of him, and you can see it on the circuit. He's gaining on Dominic Foreman. It's only a matter of time, surely, at 3 seconds a lap faster before Pocock can find his way through. Frank van Homet 3 seconds almost off the pace of Bradley Pocock on that previous lap, lap number 2. He still sits in 4th position, with Sebastian Kjærgaard dropping further back from him, and the rest of the pack well in arrears now of this lead quintet as Bradley Pocock looks to the inside, and move made pretty straightforward in the end on Dominic Foreman. Foreman looking for the cutback. He has the momentum then down to the top end of the circuit, but it's Pocock who has the inside line and claims the position. So it's Bradley Pocock once again on the move as Dominic Foreman looks over his shoulder. He got a little bit out of shape there trying to recover that 2nd place, but he's probably better off trying to settle into his rhythm now, because he was largely on the same pace as Frank van Homet on that previous lap, and it's going to take a while for the Dutchman to gain in on this top 3 unless he can find an extra turn of speed. It's Blackwell who leads, but it's Pocock who's coming for him. Dominic Foreman in 3rd position, Frank van Homet and Sebastian Kjærgaard still rounding out the top 5, and no changes further down the order with Jody Burton and Pat Crump trying to hold on to their positions. Blackwell coming in to complete lap number 3, and there is nothing to choose, little more than a bike length now between the top 2. Bradley Pocock halted slightly on that previous lap, a 1:31.2, but still over a second faster than Blaine Blackwell. A new personal best from Dominic Foreman for 3rd position, so that trouble as Bradley Pocock came through hasn't affected him too greatly, and he's back running the same pace as Frank van Homet, who was also in the 1:33.3s on lap number 3. Sebastian Kjærgaard gaining ground on both of the riders directly up ahead of him as he continues to drop the rest of the pack from Jody Burton and down. Pat Crump still holding that 7th place. Lighting it up in the challenge for the race lead, it's Bradley Pocock. He looked to the inside on Dominic Foreman here a lap ago, and he's done the same on Blaine Blackwell. We have a new race leader, and it's Bradley Pocock back in familiar territory The top two in the race as it stands in this third moto are the top two in each of the two races so far, as Blaine Blackwell gets into trouble in the same place that Dominic Foreman had a lap before him, and that's enabled Foreman to gain in a bit of ground on Blaine Blackwell. It's Pocock now out in front, it's Blackwell in second position, it's Foreman in third, and while these riders have squabbled with one another, Frank van Homert has been able to gain in a little bit of the lost ground from his opening lap difficulties, but not enough to make a serious impression at the moment, and after finishing in third place in each of the opening two motos, it's another unconvincing ride so far from Frank van Homert. Still plenty of time for him to turn his fortunes around, but at the moment it doesn't look as though there's going to be any catching Bradley Pocock, who since hitting the front has blasted clear. Dominic Foreman had a go at the back of Blaine Blackwell earlier on in the race. He looks up to the outside line as they come towards the start-finish straight once again to complete lap number 4. Another new personal best lap there from Dominic Foreman, a 1:32.4. He's gained almost 2 seconds there on Blaine Blackwell on that previous lap, while Blackwell was losing out to Bradley Pocock and suffering. So Dominic Foreman, who's already had a couple of goes at attacking the tail of Blaine Blackwell, he gets a little bit caught out there by the positioning of some of the lap traffic, and that's going to drop him slightly further in arrears as we look further down the order, where it's the 4.95 of Joe Smith, who's dropped back behind Andrew Luke and is now coming under attack from David Lamb. Lamb rounding out the top 10, and Wayne Chamel coming through the field right behind him, running significantly faster than anyone other than the top 5 in this race. Bradley Pocock, your race leader, pulling out 2 seconds or more on that previous lap ahead of Blaine Blackwell. Dominic Foreman is the rider to watch. He's making progress on the tail of Blaine Blackwell. This has been comfortably his best ride of the weekend so far, and he's still in line for a top 3 finish, although Frank van Homert will have something to say about that. The top 4 are on the same straight as they come through the infield section. Sebastian Kierkegaard being dropped slightly on that previous lap, lap number 4, and that's Pat Crump with mechanical difficulties by the looks of things. Crump, and that could be terminal from P6, the number 33, Pat Crump, with difficulties further down the order as Wayne Chamel continues his pursuit. He's made up another 2 positions just on this lap so far. And after the retirement of Pat Crump, Dominic Foreman has hit problems somewhere. He hasn't clocked up on the timing as having completed lap 6, and Frank van Homert is now clear of him in third. That also promotes Sebastian Kierkegaard into 4th position. So what a disastrous race for the Red Circles boys, because it's Pat Crump first out, and then Dominic Foreman, who looks set to fail to finish in this one as well. Blaine Blackwell still holding 2nd position on the tail of Bradley Pocock, who is continuing to try and extend that margin out in front. It's 3.5 seconds as things stand. Pocock leading Blackwell. 3rd position with Van Homert, then promoted at the expense of Dominic Foreman. 4th position with Sebastian Kierkegaard. Wayne Chamel has now broken to the front of that pack and sets a new personal best, actually faster by a second than Sebastian Kierkegaard on lap number 6, but I doubt that he'll be able to reel in the lost time. He's 30 seconds back from the lead quartet, and the top 3 positions in this race at least look set to come from Bradley Pocock, Blaine Blackwell, Frank van Homert and Sebastian Kierkegaard. But in which order? On board with Sebastian Kierkegaard, lapping at a very similar pace at the moment to Frank van Homert, his teammate who sits in 3rd place, but van Homert dropping a second back from Blaine Blackwell on lap number 7, and things look settled from there. 4 seconds between 2nd and 3rd places. Is Sebastian Kierkegaard slowing up? Kierkegaard with mechanical difficulties then by the looks of it, as we see Blaine Blackwell pulling away out in front ahead of Frank van Homert and heading into the final lap from P2, but it's disaster further down the order from Sebastian Kierkegaard, who's trickling towards a halt, and he is well adrift now from the top 3 positions, and it may well turn into a question of whether he could even get into the final lap, let alone come through to the finish. He's looking over his shoulder as riders come streaming past him, only to unlap themselves, of course, but there's no way he's going to be able to continue and do a full lap like that, and in fact he looks as though he's pulling up before the start-finish line. Now that could be strategic, because of course he will need to complete the race if he wants to have a finish and a point-scoring result here, and there's quite a lot of riders not on the lead lap, so if he can wait until the race leader comes through to complete this race, Bradley Pocock, then he may be able to shuffle over the line behind him and claim a point-scoring finish a lap down, but he's certainly not going to get anything like the points haul that he would have had for a 4th position finish, and it's Wayne Chamel who's promoted up to P4, with Jody Burton moving 5th and Andrew Luke in 6th position. So Sebastian Kierkegaard dropping out of contention for a top 3 place in this 3rd moto. He was on the tail of the 3 riders who'd formed the top 3 in the opening 2 races of the weekend, and that is now going to be the podium with an unchanged lineup in the top 3 spaces. Bradley Pocock then, one final jump to negotiate, one final turn, and it's going to be 3 wins out of 3 at round 3 for Bradley Pocock. And there is Sebastian Kergar scooting over the line a lap behind, so by my reckoning, that will be a position on the fringes of the top 10. The first of the lap runners coming in at about 10th and 11th position, so it's going to be a race victory for Bradley Pocock, a 3rd consecutive runner-up position for Blaine Blackwell. That gives him a well-deserved 2nd place overall here at round 3. Frank van Homet with a disappointing day and dropping further back in that race compared to his main championship rival, Bradley Pocock. 4th position for Wayne Chabelle, and Jody Burton rounding out the top 5. That's a good result for him there in the 3rd moto here in Worcester.
To be honest, I had 3 really bad starts, and I tried a couple different things every moto to behind the gate because it's so slippery. And well, obviously all the things I tried didn't work out for me, and I had to come from behind. I had a second moto, had a really bad start. It was, I think, 15th in the first turn, so that was bad. And yeah, I just tried to get up front as fast as possible, but those guys were 1 and 2 out of the gate, so they probably were gone. And I caught up to the rear wheel every time of Blaine and just couldn't make the pass. I was struggling with lappers and everything, and I just couldn't make it happen.
I think in race 2, I think the back markers helped me out a lot. But yeah, he's managed to find some good lines, not too rough, so it's good.
Yeah, Grayson's been good, but I mean, my starts I need to improve on for sure, definitely. Like, haven't been getting out of the gate very easy, but you know, I've managed to muscle my way through as well and get back up to the front, which is where you need to be initially. So yeah, it hasn't gone all to plan like completely, but you know, at the end of the day, 3 wins is 3 wins, and I've had to work for it, but sometimes it's more pleasing in that way, so I'm happy with that for sure.
So an outstanding 3 rides and 66-point haul for Blaine Blackwell moves him up to 3rd position in the championship standings, ahead of Sebastian Kergar, who drops back partly as a result of his mechanical difficulties at round 3 of the campaign. Meanwhile, behind them, Dominic Foreman drops closer to the pack behind than the lead quartet after his own mechanical problems. And up front, Frank van Homet has seen a 7-point lead reversed into an 8-point deficit in the course of just 3 races. The Dutchman will aim to recover next time out at round 4, also here in Worcester.